Today I'm going to show you how to replace the trimmer line in your EGO battery electric trimmer. So I have the EGO ST1200 battery electric trimmer. I showed a bit of this trimmer in a previous video I made about the EGO LM2000S battery electric lawnmower. In that video, I was highlighting how the batteries for the EGO lawnmowers and the EGO trimmers are completely interchangeable. However, in this video, I will be going over how I change the trimmer line in my EGO trimmer. We just need some 2mm nylon trimmer line and something we can use to cut the line. Now, the first thing anyone should do before attempting to reload their trimmer line is remove their battery. Then you need to locate the release tabs for the spool retainer. Press in on these release tabs and then remove the spool retainer by pulling it straight out. At this point, you can remove the spool itself. That's the green part here that actually holds the trimmer line. The owner's manual says you can use about 16 feet of line, but I don't tend to use that much myself. I simply step on a piece of line and I pull 2 lengths of the line up beside my head. And that gives me about 12 feet of line, and that has tended to work out well for me. That little trick also takes care of an important step, which is folding the line in half. I want to point out an important marking on top of the spool. It's the words wind cord and an arrow. That's the direction you wind the trim line. Now, once you've folded your line in half, you can hook the folded end of the trim line onto either of the slots that you will see in the middle ring of the spool. You then wind the line in the direction indicated on the spool, in 2 even and tightly wound layers. Each half of the line is wound in its own slot. Yes, both lines are wound in the same direction. You're done winding when you have about 4 or 5 inches of line remaining. You then place the ends of your cutting line in 2 of the notches you see on the spool. Pick a notch that allows a sufficient amount of line to protrude, and then the other half of the line is hooked in the opposite notch. You want to leave at least 4 inches of line sticking out each notch. Then you're going to drop the spool back into the spool retainer, and you're going to line up the notches that have the protruding line with the metal eyelets in the spool retainer. When these are all lined up, you can then release the line from those little notches and pull the line down into the eyelets of the spool retainer. Now you're ready to replace the loaded spool retainer back into the spool base of the trimmer. Just locate the openings for the release tabs in the spool base. Line up the release tabs right over the openings and then push the spool retainer back into the spool base. EGO recommends doing this in the opposite direction, with the spool base facing down and the spool retainer facing up, but I find my approach a little easier. Don't worry if you have more line protruding than you need. Any excess will automatically get cut by the built-in line cutting blade. It's somewhere around here. Let me just clean this up for you. There, you see? That's the line cutting blade. So now we're ready to use our trimmer. As soon as we start it up, any excess line is trimmed by the line cutter, and we're good to go. After a few minutes of use, the line will become worn, frayed, and significantly shorter, at which point you can just tap that green bump knob on the ground, and you will hear a distinct increase in the noise made by the trimmer once the line is fully released. If you want to trim around a tree, you can extend the bump protector to protect the tree that you're trimming around. And there you go. That's how to use an EGO ST1200 battery electric lawn trimmer, and that's how you reload the trim line.